Our next keynote speaker is from a government agency we work with quite regularly. And I'm happy to say that I've found the leadership at this agency recognizes the many attributes ALPA and its members bring to the table. The Transportation Security Administration knows that we are the last line of defense for our airliners. And our number one priority is aviation safety and security. And the current administrator of the TSA, Vice Admiral Peter Neffenger, works with us on a daily basis to achieve that common goal as we strive to improve aviation security. We've had the pleasure of dealing with Peter on a number of issues since he took the reins a little more than a year ago. He is a valued partner, one who recognizes the benefits of a risk-based security initiatives like known crew member, and the services our pilots provide this nation as federal flight deck officers. Under his leadership, TSA is continuing to evolve a risk-based, intelligence-driven, professional agency dedicated to protecting the U.S. transportation system. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome TSA Administrator Peter Neffenger.
Thanks very much. Well, good afternoon, and thanks for sticking around for the last guy of the conference. It's a real pleasure to be here. And Tim, thank you for the introduction, and thank you very much to you and ALPA for the invitation to be here. You're absolutely right. We value this partnership in some ways more than any of our other partnerships because of the critical nature of what you do and how important it is to protect the system that you operate in. I just got back from a conference in Denver where we're looking at transforming the system. I'll talk a little bit more about that. I'm going to take about 10 or 15 minutes just to give you some general thoughts on what this first year at TSA has been like and how I see our work evolving, how I see the organization evolving and transforming. But I'd like to start by just saying thank you once again for the strong partnership that we have with ALPA, for keeping us safe. I travel quite a bit. My family travels quite a bit. My agency travels quite a bit. We depend upon you for our safety and our security in the air. And I know that you depend upon us to ensure that the people and the baggage and the cargo that's behind you and below you in the aircraft poses as no threat or as little threat as possible. And I want you to know that we really take that responsibility seriously. And we have absolutely rededicated ourselves over this past year to continuing to improve our ability to detect, deter, and disrupt any threats that may come into the system. We know that we have to do our job well, just as you do every day. So I thank you for that partnership, and we'll continue to work it very, very carefully as we go forward. It's nice to be in a room full of aviation professionals and pilots. Despite the fact that I spent 34 years in a maritime service, I started out as a pilot. My mother was a pilot, a general aviation pilot. We had a little Cessna 172, and she forced us all to become licensed private pilots because she was worried that someday she would pass out in the air and wouldn't get home unless we brought her there. So it was a lot of fun. You can tell by my eyesight that I couldn't carry that far forward into my career, but it was a lot of fun growing up with her. And that, and the fact that she'd always send us up. She worked at a small regional airport in northern Ohio, and out of that airport there were a couple of aerobatic pilots. They flew these little pit specials. And every now and then she'd stick one of us in the back of one of those pit specials. And I think a couple 100 barrel rolls, and I decided maybe a maritime career wasn't a bad idea after all. But anyways, thanks again. I talked about transforming TSA. Let me take a minute to talk about where we're trying to go, and then I'd like to really focus on this partnership. Over this past year, we've worked very hard to really focus on our effectiveness across the board, looking at our screening operations, at our cargo screening operations, at our vetting operations, our intelligence program, all of the things that go into determining what types of threats might be coming to the system. As you know, a year ago, some people were questioning TSA's ability. I will tell you that I've never felt more proud and more confident in an agency than I have in the folks at TSA. And they've come a long way. We've got a great workforce, one of the most dedicated workforces I've ever seen. And I know how seriously they take the work that they do. You've got about 60,000 people out there every day working very hard to ensure that the system that you operate in is safe to do so. We really do see ourselves as an evolving agency, and we want to evolve faster than the threat evolves around us. And we want to do so in a way that supports the work that you do on a daily basis. One of the foundations of that is training, and you know that better than anybody else. Training is not just only foundational to the culture of an organization, it's foundational to its successful operation. And so this past year, one of the things I'm really proud to report is that for the first time ever, we established a TSA training academy down at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center in Glencoe, Georgia. This is a combined training center that trains a lot of federal government agencies, including the U.S. Coast Guard, Customs and Border Protection, Federal Protective Service, the Secret Service trains there, and other local and state law enforcement agencies. And so we worked with the director of the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center to establish a full-time TSA academy. And we started by training all of our frontline transportation security officers. These are the uniformed officers that you see at the screening checkpoints. And that has been a tremendous success. We graduate about 192 students a week now, starting from the first of the year. We've pushed about, I want to say, close to 3,000 people out. We also have dramatically increased our hiring this past year, and we've brought a lot of new people on board. We're very excited. As I mentioned to Captain Knoll earlier, any of you who are interested at any point in going down and just seeing that academy, or better yet, talking to one of the graduating classes. They graduate every Thursday. That's an open invitation to anybody who would like to go. I think you'd be very impressed with the facility that we have down there. We built an airport environment. We built a hands-on screening simulation, and we just determined that is going to be, from my opinion, the premier transportation security training center in the world, if we can get it to its end state. This next year, we'll start training all new hires that come into TSA on January 1st, and then following that, we'll start rolling our existing staff through there for refresher training and a regular thing. And we're building an entire training curriculum for a career long. Something that sounds like it pretty straightforward to those of you who do this on a regular basis, but it's pretty exciting to do that into TSA. We also, this past summer, we were struggling with what were very large congregations of people and long lines at the security checkpoints at some of our largest airports. I had, having landed at Brussels the morning, I don't know if the United pilot who flew me to Brussels that morning from Newark is in the room, but I will tell you, I thought about what it would be like to be that pilot as we pulled up to the gate, and about 20 feet off the jet bridge, we came to a stop, and then we sat on the aircraft for about 3.5 hours as we watched, what was the real concern and panic in some cases, and uncertainty about what was happening go on around us. You could see it out and about. And so when you think about public areas of airports, it was rightfully a concern of people that there were large lines. I think you found that this summer we did a pretty good job of fixing that. Some of that was congressional help in getting some reprogrammings that dramatically improved our ability to get staff out and resources out in place. But it was also a change to the way we operate. All of those of you who come from operating agencies, and all of you do, know that you operate from the front end of the organization, not from the back end of the organization. And so we really dramatically changed the way we operate. We established a national command center to think differently about the approaches to the checkpoint from the checkpoint itself, managing the approaches as a separate security issue from the checkpoint itself. And then to do so from a national perspective, providing resources as necessary. So I think we got ourselves well ahead of the problems that we expected to have. And I will tell you, we had 8 days over the past 2 weeks where we had larger travel days than any of the largest Thanksgiving holiday days in history. So we've had the highest travel volume in history from our perspective. And this is people coming through checkpoints. That's not just all, it's not all passengers. It includes some employees and the like. So we've been very happy with that. And the most important part of that is we did it, I believe, while maintaining a high degree of effectiveness. We're testing ourselves now. We've seen our effectiveness go up considerably, and we're happy about that. Let me just finish up with a few thoughts on the threat environment. I mentioned the Brussels attack, but you all know that this is one of the most challenging and dynamic threat environments we've been in a long time. I hesitate to put the word ever in there because someone can always find a time when things were worse, but but I can't tell you a time that things were more dynamic. It's dynamic because there are a lot of different groups that have expressed intent to do harm to the West. There is still a very real and intense focus on aviation amongst some of these groups. You've got core Al-Qaeda, you've got the Al-Qaeda spin-offs, you've got now the ISIL threat and its spin-offs, and then you have the unpredictable element of the lone actors that seem to just self-activate and take action. We've had a couple of aircraft that have been attacked in this past year. You had Metrojet over the Sinai, and then you had the Dalo Airlines coming out of Mogadishu, which fortunately didn't come down. The explosion killed the person we suspect was the bomber, and the aircraft was able to make it safely to ground. But all of that tells me that the threat is not only real, it's still out there, and it's still very active. And the threat streams that we follow tell us that that's not diminishing any. So that's why, as I said, it's very important that we do this. We do this well, and we pay attention to what your concerns are, and we listen to you carefully. The public-private partnership that we have is probably one of the most important ones, because as Tim said, you're the ones with the most at stake in the cockpit, and like I said, you do the thing that most law enforcement officers tell you never to do: put your back to all the potential threats in the world, and we do our best to make sure that those folks are people that you can easily have your back turned towards and trust them. So, as I think about how do you deal with this evolving threat, we've really tried to change the way we think about it. You want to get away from a static security environment into one that's dynamic. And dynamic not just at the checkpoint, but dynamic throughout the whole system. So one of the things that I really thought about after the Brussels attack, after the Turkish Istanbul airport attack, Metrojet and the like, is to think about the whole, for lack of a better term, the whole ecosystem of security. From, in the case of a passenger, from the time they make a reservation to the arrival at their destination. In the case of the aviation system, what is it that goes into total flight risk? So from your perspective, there are a lot of things that come together before you take that aircraft off the ground, or before you pull it away from the gate, or before you pull it away from the facility where it's loaded its cargo. And if you think of all of those streams coming in, how do they play into the total risk of the system? And I don't think that we have done that to the extent that we need to in the past. So we're putting a lot of effort into that this year. We'll be talking to you and others about getting input. We'll be sharing with you some models that we have as we're looking at trying to model that system in a way that tells us where we should put most of our effort, or where our efforts need to be distributed in order to do that right. And then how can you distribute security more effectively throughout that system, so that you don't just think in terms of outside the airport, the public area, a checkpoint, sterile area, which in my mind tends to have people compartmentalize things in a way that says, that's not my problem over here, I only worry about this piece and or this piece here. So we want to tie it together more effectively so that as you move through that system, you move through that system understanding that it's an integrated system and it works together. This conference I was just at in Denver was part of that, looking at integrating an entire aviation security system from and all the elements that go into that. You're a piece of that. You mentioned the Federal Flight Deck Officer Program, the Known Crew Member Program, Cockpit Access Security System Program. These are all things that wouldn't exist without ALPA. And ALPA's not just your collaboration, without your finger poking behind the scenes. And I will tell you, from my perspective, if you don't poke fingers into the chest or the backs of government agencies periodically, government agencies sometimes don't do the right thing, or don't know you're there, or forget and just go on to autopilot. So that's the way you turn off the autopilot on a government agency, is you come up and remind us of some of the things that you're doing. I am a strong supporter of the Federal Flight Deck Officer Program. I think it's, first of all, I want to say thank you to those of you in the program, because I know it's voluntary. I know that you give your own time to train in that program. We are looking at dramatically improving our ability to service that program with you, and we're open to all sorts of suggestions as to how to continue to make it better. I know there's been some concern in the past about TSA support. I will tell you that I don't see there's certainly no wavering of support from my perspective, and I don't see any change in support within the agency. I will tell you, I did this year take money that was slated for a training facility in Atlanta, And I pushed that money into a future budget because I really needed to get some more staff on board to deal with what was a real shortage of people to deal with the problems that we have. But I assure you that was not any attempt to show any lack of support for the program. It was just the exigency of the summer challenges. But we still have that on the books. We plan to go forward with it. There's strong support for it within the administration, and we'll move forward. The known crew member program, I think that's been a huge success. It does exactly what we should be doing with respect to risk. If I can't trust the people who I'm giving the aircraft to, then we've got bigger problems in the system than just whether or not we should be allowing crew members to come through the portal. So I think it's working out really well. I know there's been some talk about can we expand this internationally. We are working with the pilot program to test some Canadian pilots going through the known crew member program, and we're just making sure that all of the standards are at the same level, and then we should be able to move forward with that. And then, I intend to continue to have conversations with my international counterparts on possibilities for expanding that known crew member program elsewhere. It's currently a domestic program, as you know, and I said we strongly support that. I guess the last thing I'd say is, we started hiring federal air marshals again for the first time in 5 years, and that's a direct tribute not only to the new director of the Federal Air Marshal Service, Rod Allison, but also to the fact that we dramatically changed the way we think about how to use them. We've changed it. We've written a Federal Air Marshal strategic plan, an operational plan. It's a classified plan, but those of you, Tim, I'm going to offer some time to sit down and explain how it's changed. And ultimately, what I want to say is that you should be much more comfortable about the way in which flights are determined for Federal Air Marshal Service access. And I know that you work very closely with the FAMs throughout. I think we have a couple of Federal Air Marshals in the audience today. They may have left when they heard I was coming, but I think they're still out there. And finally, what I'm most interested in is your thoughts on what you see globally. I think we're a long way from a globally consistent aviation security system. One of the things that I hope to do at the ICAO General Assembly, which comes up the end of September, is to really begin to drive towards a true global security system, one that has consistent standards, and not just consistent standards, but consistently enforced standards, and that we understand what that enforcement means. So I hope that over the coming months we can have more specific talks and dialogue about what some of the things you're seeing, what you're seeing in foreign airports, what you're seeing in our own airports, and where you see opportunities for attention, improvement, or others. Because I think that in some respects nobody sees as many places as you do collectively, and you have an important perspective on that. So as I said, we'll be talking to the ICAO General Assembly. Interestingly enough, the UN Security Council is considering a resolution on aviation security I believe, either this week or next week, and are going to vote on it the week before the ICAO General Assembly. So I encourage you to take a look at that draft Security Council resolution, and if you have thoughts or inputs, feel free to let us know, and we'll feed those to our respective people and at the State Department. So let me just finish up and then open it up to questions, and I'll finish it with a challenge. Every regulatory agency's challenge is to do the right thing, and left to our own devices, we often will have to guess at the right thing. So keep aggressively engaging us. You always do, but I mean that sincerely. I hope you'll find a TSA that is open. We're trying to be as transparent as possible. If you have questions about what we're doing, please ask, and I promise you we'll be as open as we can be. And more importantly, we hope you'll see a willingness to engage and discuss things in a way going forward that really advances your concerns and takes into account the things that we really should be caring about. So, Tim, thank you. Thank you all for sticking around this late in the day. I know you've got a banquet tonight. I wish I could attend with you. Unfortunately, I have a previous engagement, but thanks again, and thank you, Tim.
Thank you. I will appreciate it here. Appreciate it.